Hi everyone, and welcome to the Stitch Sessions. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining in today. Today we're going to work on the Mobius Twist Infinity Scarf. And it looks complicated, but it's actually quite easy. This particular project will be very beginner friendly as we will only be using the single crochet stitches with a little bit of a twist, so to speak. As you can see here, it's got this really nice texture to it. And we created that by going into the back loops only of the stitches. And I know it may sound a little bit daunting if you're newer to crochet, but I promise you once we break it down, you're going to see just how easy it is. And I used a really nice big bulky yarn so that it sits nice and cozy around the neck, as you can see, modeled here by the beautiful Miss Maya. And so it's a quick project, it's super easy to do, and I think you're going to have fun doing this. So without further ado, let's grab all of our materials and let's get stitching up our Mobius Twist scarf. Okay, so here are the materials we're going to need for our scarf. You're going to always need a pair of scissors, of course. And for this project, I am using Red Hearts Grande, and it's a really super bulky yarn, which I'm excited to kind of work with. It's considered a bulky size 7. Now, they're recommending an 11.5 millimeter hook. For this project, I'm not sure if you can see this, I'm going to use a 16 millimeter hook. It's also known as a size Q or a size 16. Okay, and I'm choosing to go with a larger hook because I'd like my stitches to sit really nice and loose. So since we're using a nice big bulky yarn like this, I wanted to really show off the thickness and the texture of it with loose stitches. So that is why I opted for a much larger hook. You don't have to use this yarn. You don't have to use a bulky yarn at all. I just thought this would be a fun project to work on with a bulky yarn. So I picked up 3 of these skeins only because I wanted mine to be nice and long and wide in its width. So each of these particular balls of yarn have 150 grams or 46 yards in each of these skeins. So I've picked up 3. Again, you can gauge your needs based on how long you'd like your scarf to be. So let's get started. So you're going to find the inside. I like to feed my yarn through the inside. It just makes it a little easier so it's not bouncing around there. And sometimes you have to pull a whole bunch of stuff out from the inside. So to begin, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a slip knot. So you're just going to pull it through and through. There are a lot of different ways to do a slip knot. If you need a little bit of a refresher, put a little link up in the cards up here on a couple of different ways you can do the slip knot. Now, I am using a fairly large hook. I don't normally use a hook this large. So if you are going for the bulky size yarn and you're going for a large hook like this, it'll take some getting used to. There's a lot to hold. So the main thing you want to be careful is not to stitch too tightly. So I just like to do a little test here, make sure it can kind of slide back and forth nicely like that. So I know for my infinity scarf, I would like it to have a length or circumference length of 60 inches. So that is 5 feet. So now I know that for me, the 60 inches, I'm going to need to do a chain length of 90 stitches. If you are using a lighter weight yarn and a smaller hook, you will probably need to do more chains depending on the length that you particularly desire. So for my infinity scarf, I definitely want it to wrap around twice and have it sit comfortably. I don't want it to be kind of choking at my neck. So for me, 90 chains is what I'm going to begin with. So that's what we're going to do first, is we are just going to make a nice long foundation chain row of 90 chains. And I want you to notice that I am just keeping them, see how really relaxed the stitches are? That's how I want this project to look. really relaxed. And I find that that brings out the softness in this yarn. This is actually an acrylic wool blend. It is 78% acrylic and 22% wool. So you definitely want it to show off its softness. If you're stitching something like this too tight, it takes on a bit of a harder texture. Okay, so I'm going to meet you at the end of 90 chains. Okay, once you've done your 90 chains, you're going to have something that looks like this. And again, consistency is the key here, so it's quite long, as you can see. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to make sure that it's not twisted. So I'm going to go right down the way here. And we're going to want to slip stitch into the very first chain we did. So I'm just making sure all of my V's stay facing upward. So I'm just going to pull that in, and that is, now remember, this is the slip knot, so don't confuse that with the last chain. The last chain is right in here. So I am just going to insert my hook and slip stitch in there to join my work. Whoops. There we go. So now what we have is a nice big circle. So now we're going to continue working in the round. So for round 1, here's what we're going to do. And the beauty of this particular project is it's going to be super easy. If you know your chain stitches, you'll be able to do this scarf no problem. We are going to chain 1. And now you're going to do a single crochet into the very next stitch, right there. Now, what's different is instead of going through the front for this first chain row, I am just going to slightly flip it over. So technically you're looking at the back of your stitches. And see these little bumps here? We're actually going to work into these bumps. And the reason why I want to do this for this project, I do this sometimes I don't, is because it'll give the edge of your work this beautiful finished knit look with the V's facing down. Now, it can be a little bit testy, okay? So I'm going to give you the option that you can just simply work into the stitches to start off. It's not a big deal. This is just a little embellishment to give it a little extra fancy look. So I'm going to show you both ways. I am going to turn it over here, and this first bump is protruding right there, okay? So what I want to do, and you can use your fingers for this, it's a nice bulky yarn, so I'm going to help it along, and then I'm just going to single crochet as usual. I'll just pull through, then yarn over and pull through 2, okay? So I'm going to do a few of these so you can see the look. Now again, you want to be careful because as you work, these stitches tend to tighten. See, that one's already snuggled in. So feel free to pull that apart. Sometimes I use another hook too. Like I might just do this and just to kind of loosen it up there. Okay, so I'm just going to help that along here. And I pull it through again, always keeping it super relaxed because that's how I want this project to look. And now I find the next bump. So the bumps are pretty easy to identify. If you turn your work like that, they'd look just like that. So I'm going to just do one more here. So I'm just going to help it through. This part will probably take you a little bit of time because it's easy for these stitches to start to snuggle in one to the other. So it's a good little project if you're watching a great Netflix show. Okay, so there you go. So now you can see, hopefully, that our first chains are sitting almost like on the bottom. So it creates this really nice finished look. So that is how I am going to continue to go all the way around until I come back to my beginning again. Now, if you're finding this a bit too persnickety for your liking, what you can do, I'm just going to pull this out. After you've slip stitched, is you can just go into the stitch as usual. So instead of the back bump like I did, you can just find the V's, see that? And just go into the stitch as normal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's still going to look pretty. I just wanted that extra little finishing touch. So I'm just going to go into that stitch. And again, I'm going in through the front in this example. Okay, see, it still looks just as nice. It's just a different look. So I'm going to leave you here for a moment, pause the video, and go all the way around until you come back up to here. And just before we join our circle, I'm going to show you how we're going to add the twist portion to our infinity scarf. So I'll meet you back here shortly. Okay, so I'm coming up to my last stitch, or for me, my last bump here. This one belongs to this. So I just have this one more. And if you've been going into the stitches, then you would be going in through the front. Just like that. So now you've got a nice long circle that goes like this. And you'll notice too that it probably has started to slightly tighten a bit, because that's what happens when you have an initial chain row. And that's why we always recommend your first chain row of any project to stitch it very loosely or use a larger hook and then go back to the hook that you're going to be using for the project. I'm fairly confident in my stitching when I need to stay relaxed. But what I'm going to do, because it's such a bulky yarn, is I'm also just going to give it a little bit of a stretch here, just to kind of relax the stitches a bit. And now we're going to talk about how to create the twist in your work. So usually what would happen is we would slip stitch to join. But because we want to create that infinity twist in it, we're going to twist it. But before we twist it, and I know this sounds funny, we want to make sure that our work is not twisted. So I'm going to just hang on to this side here, and I just want to make sure that the front of my work see how it's twisted down? I want all of that to be facing up, and you'll see why in a second. And so I've still hung on to my original one, and it should meet up very nicely with mine here. There we go. So that was the front I held on to, and this is the front here. So I'm just going to turn it this way. So I know both of these ends are the front of my work. And like I said, usually when we're joining in the round, we're going to slip stitch here. But to create the twist in our work, now that we've straightened it out and made sure it's not twisted, now we are going to purposefully twist it. So instead of the slip stitch here, what we're going to do is we're going to take this end, and which is the top of our work here, and we're just going to turn it down. Okay, so your tail is now kind of in front of you. Okay, so now it looks something like this. So you're thinking, how the heck is that going to work? So normally it would be here, and then we'd slip stitch to join. So it would just continue on. And for a regular cowl or something like that, or a hat, you would absolutely do that. But here we're going to take the top of our work and flip it down. So the top on the left side, I'm flipping down. I'm just going to take that tail down. So now I'm going to grab my hook, and now I'm going to continue to stitch. I'm going to continue doing single crochets, but because I've turned this side down, I'm now going to be working into the bottom of that chain. And so see, now it'll be a lot easier to find those stitches because we've got those V's there. So I'm just going to find the very first stitch here along the bottom. So remember, this is the bottom of where we stitched. And what I want to do is I'm going to go into the front loops. Okay, so remember, this is our V, and this is the front loop, and that's the back loop. For a regular single crochet, we would go into both of these loops here, just like that. Okay, again, for this project, we're adding just a little something different. We're just going to pick up that front loop. That's the loop that's closest to you. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through, and yarn over and pull through just like a regular single crochet stitch. Okay, we're going to do that again into the next stitch. So if you turn your work, you can see your V's. this loop that's closest to you, that's the one we're going to work into. And this is basically going to be what we're going to do now for the rest of your project, for rows and rows, or rounds and rounds, I should say. I'm going to do that again. This is the next stitch. Front loop is right here. Going to insert, and you might have to help it along, and pull through. And again, I just want to keep it nice and relaxed. Okay. So you've got something that looks like this. And don't worry if you feel like, how come it's getting thicker here? So because we've turned the top down, we are now going to work along the bottom edge of the original chain row. We're going to come up around, and because we've twisted it, by the time we're done, we're going to come back to here, to our original tail. And this will be a great way to tell that you've come back to the beginning of your infinity round, okay? So you know how we started, or I started with 90 stitches? Because we've created the twist, we're going to stitch along the bottom and along the top of the ring, so to speak. So that means we're actually going to work 180 stitches every time before we come back around to our tail. Okay, so I've done 90. I'm now going to continue around, and eventually I'm going to keep going until I hit this. And then I'm going to meet up with you guys and just kind of go over the beginning of one more round, just so that it kind of makes a little bit of sense to you guys. But at this point, you shouldn't have anything else to worry about. Just keep going for rounds and rounds and rounds. But I'm going to meet you back up when I've done my 180 in the front loops only. And then I'll just talk you through the next section, and then I'll set you loose basically. But before I let you go, I'm also just going to turn this over. And you'll notice this much later on when I meet up with you again. But when we work into the front loops, it's pushing these back loops forward. So when I meet back up with you at the tail, you should be able to see a little bit of a ridging effect happening there. Okay? So one single crochet into each, front loops only. I'll meet you back at your tail. Okay, so when you've gone all the way around, see how pretty that nice ridge is? Just gorgeous. When you've come all the way around, so this is my loop here that I've just finished, my last one, and there is my tail. So you see, we started out here, we came all the way around, and eventually we meet back up with the tail. So I've got one more stitch here, so I'm just going to go in the front loop and just single crochet, pull it through, and now this round is done. Now be careful, because some people might think that this is still a stitch, and it's not. So if you see, if you notice, this, which was the chain one, is coming out of that stitch. So technically it's already been worked. So you see your tail. So what we're going to do into here is we're going to slip stitch to join. Okay. And you're just going to slip stitch just like that. So now our round is done, and you can go around and around and around, and eventually you'll notice, see that? That's what we want. That is the Mobius twist in our infinity scarf. So we are on the right track. So now as you continue on, you are just going to continue doing what we just did. Whoops, I got turned around there. So you will go around. So now we're back on the top. We'll go around the top, and it will just take care of itself. Before you know it, you'll be coming up back around the end. Now it can sometimes make you go, where am I? Before you know where to slip stitch. Because we're using single crochets, they're a shorter stitch, sometimes it can be a little tricky. So here's what I recommend you do. Every time you come to a slip stitch round, add a stitch marker into the very first stitch. So what we're going to do is we're going to chain one. So this is our new row, our new round, I should say, and we're not going to go in there. And we're just going to pick up the front loop of this stitch here. We're going to single crochet. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to place a stitch marker. I had one here. Now you can use a traditional stitch marker, but because this is such bulky yarn, I like using things like safety pins because I know they're going to stay. So I'm just going to insert my safety pin there. And now I know I'm just going to keep stitching. And if I come around here and I see, oh, my safety pin's on the bottom, it means I'm not finished the round. I just keep going until eventually I start stitching my way up to approach this. Once I see that safety pin, I really will know I've done my round. And then I am just going to take that safety pin out, slip stitch to join, and I'll do the same thing. I'll chain one and then single crochet into the front loop and then replace the safety pin in there. That just helps you keep track of where you are, especially if you're a bit of a newer crocheter. Those of you that are much more experienced, you probably can just do this in your sleep. But if you misplace that, you can always tell wherever your tail is hanging out. And eventually this will end up in the middle of your work because your scarf will basically work outwards this way. But just a general gauge, just look for where your tail is. And that's usually where the beginning and the end of your round are. All right, so this is what you're going to do for the rest of your project. You're going to make yours as thick as you would like. So for me, I'm going to work my way through my 3 skeins and see what comes of that. So I'll meet you guys at the end. Okay, here we are, my finished Mobius twist scarf. And so I did a total of 5 complete rounds. Now, when you look at this, it will look like I have 10 rows. Now, remember that the round not only goes around the top, but then around the bottom, kind of like a figure 8. So that is how many I did for mine, because again, I had a really bulky yarn. You may do more rounds for yours if you're using a slightly thinner yarn. So you can see here, that is the right side, so to speak. And then you can see where the twist happens right there, okay? So just love how that works out. So you can wear it nice and long if you like, or you can wrap it a couple of times, which I like to do. So it's nice and bulky and cozy. And you'll see that as demonstrated here in the photos that I've put up of our lovely model, Miss Maya, who modeled my Mobius scarf for you. So you can make it nice and chunky like that. And I just love how it sits, and the whole twistiness of it just gives it this nice extra bulky texture. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed working on this project. It is a really quick project to work up, so it's fantastic if you're looking for an extra accessory to add to your own wardrobe, or maybe even for a gift for someone. And I loved how this ribbing effect came out. I just think it's just great for adding wonderful texture. Now, as always, if you have any questions, make sure you leave me a comment in the comment box down below, or just pop me an email directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you press that little red subscribe button and click that notification bell so that you always stay up to date every time I upload a new video. We have a new video every Wednesday morning. And make sure if you like these types of videos to give me a thumbs up. And that way I'll know that you like this type of content and I will continue to make more. All right, guys. As always, have an amazing day. Happy crocheting. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next session. Bye-bye.